for Florida today, his wife Jill stepped in and pulled him back, reminding him to keep more distance from reporters.
I'm sorry.
The precautions taken by the Biden campaign while in Florida were evident. Masks, social distancing, and small invite-only crowds. That's in sharp contrast to the Trump campaign, still operating without a candidate. But supporters say he'll be back out on the trail soon.
A leader doesn't hide. A leader gets in front and he leads everyone and says, come on, follow me.
And today, aides suggested his COVID-19 diagnosis will be a selling point to voters.
He has experience as commander-in-chief. He has experience as a businessman. He has experience now fighting the coronavirus as an individual. Those firsthand experiences, Joe Biden, he doesn't have those.
New CBS News Battleground Tracker polls showed a tied race in Ohio and Biden up 7 in Pennsylvania, where voters tell us the president's diagnosis and handling of the pandemic are on their minds.
I'm a little bit sad, because I think we need a vigorous debate going forward.
He downplays everything, so it really didn't surprise me that he contracted the virus.
Biden campaigned today in the Little Haiti and Little Havana neighborhoods of Miami, where he had a message for the president.
Now that he's busy tweeting campaign messages, I would ask him to do this. Listen to the scientist.
Was dropped from his job for fighting with a student. A few weeks later, he returned to the classroom, shot the student unsuccessfully, held the class hostage, and then shot himself successfully. This fact caught my eye. Last sentence, Times. A neighbor described the teacher as a nice boy, always reading Catcher in the Rye. This nitwit Chapman, who shot John Lennon, said he did it because he wanted to draw the attention of the world to Catcher in the Rye. And the reading of this book would be his defense. Young Hinckley, the whiz kid who shot Reagan and his press secretary, said, if you want my defense, all you have to do is read Catcher in the Rye.
I haven't read it in years.
Well, I borrowed a copy from a young friend of mine because I wanted to see what she had underlined. And I read this book to find out why this touching, beautiful, sensitive story published in July 1951 had turned into this manifesto of hate. I started reading. It's exactly as I had remembered. Everybody's a phony. Page 2, my brother's in Hollywood being a prostitute. Page 3, what a phony slob his father was. Page 9, people never notice anything. Then on page 22, my hair stood up. Well, remember Holden Caulfield, the definitive, sensitive youth wearing his red hunter's cap? A deer hunter's cap? Like hell it is. I sort of closed one eye like I was taking aim at it. This is a people shooting hat. I shoot people in this hat. This book is preparing people for bigger moments in their lives than I'd ever dreamed of. Then, on page 89, I'd rather push a guy out the window or chop his head off with an axe than sock him in the jaw. I hate fistfights. What scares me most is the other guy's face. I've finished the book. It's a touching story. A comic because the boy wants to do so much and can't do anything. Hates all phoniness and only lies to others. Wants everyone to like him, but is only hateful and is completely self-involved. In other words, a pretty accurate picture of a male adolescent. And what alarms me about the book, not the book so much as the aura about it, is this. The book is primarily about paralysis. The boy can't function. And at the end, before he can run away and start a new life, it starts to rain, and he folds. Now, there's nothing wrong in writing about emotional and intellectual paralysis. It may indeed, thanks to Chekhov and Samuel Beckett, be the great modern theme. The extraordinary last lines of Waiting for Godot. Let's go. Yes. Let's go. Stage directions. They do not move. But the aura around this book of Salinger's, which perhaps should be read by everyone but young men, is this. It mirrors like a funhouse mirror and amplifies like a distorted speaker one of the great tragedies of our times. The death of the imagination. Because what else is paralysis? The imagination has been so debased that imagination, being imaginative, rather than being the linchpin of our existence, now stands as a synonym for something outside ourselves. like science fiction or some new use for tangerine slices on raw pork chops. What an imaginative summer recipe. And Star Wars, so imaginative. And Star Trek, so imaginative. And Lord of the Rings, all those dwarves, so imaginative. The imagination has moved out of the realm of being our link, our most personal link with our inner lives, in the world outside that world, this world we share. What is schizophrenia but a horrifying state where what's in here doesn't match up with what's out there? Why has imagination become a synonym for style? I believe the imagination is the passport that we create to help take us into the real world. I believe the imagination is merely another phrase for what is most uniquely us. Jung says, the greatest sin is to be unconscious. Our boy Holden says, what scares me most is the other guy's face. It wouldn't be so bad if you could both be blindfolded. Most of the time, the faces that we face are not the other guy's, but our own faces. And it is the worst kind of yellowness, to be so scared of yourself that you put blindfolds on rather than deal with yourself. To face ourselves, that's the hard thing. The imagination, that's God's gift to make the act of self-examination bearable.
Eat or whatever those things are, get on an airplane. Should masks be made of a certain material? Gloves, are handkerchiefs effective? Can you talk about PPE for the general public?
Well, you know, the best PPE for the general public, if possible, right now, is to maintain the physical and social distancing. But as we've said, and I think all of us would agree, there are certain circumstances in which it is beyond your control when you need to do necessary things, like go to the drugstore and get your medication, go to the grocery store and get your food, that in fact you need some supplementation to just physical distancing. And that's the reason why some time ago, the recommendation was made, I believe it was Dr. Redfield at the CDC who first said that, about getting some sort of a covering. We don't want to call it a mask because back then we were concerned we would be taking masks away from the healthcare providers. But some sort of mask-like facial covering, I think for the time being, should be a very regular part of how we prevent the spread of infection. And in fact, the more and more as you go outside, right here and where I'm sitting in Washington, D.C., you can see many people out there with masks on, which gives me some degree of comfort.
Jung says, the greatest sin is to be unconscious. Our boy Holden says, what scares me most is the other guy's face. It wouldn't be so bad if you could both be blindfolded. Most of the time, the faces that we face are not the other guy's, but our own faces. And it is the worst kind of yellowness, to be so scared of yourself that you put blindfolds on rather than deal with yourself.
Good morning. It's 7:20 on February 3rd. Time for drive time weather. Well, the weather today, not so perfect. But we expect it to be relatively fair. That should be good news for you commuters. As part of the ongoing CO2 cleanup, there's a micro machine dispersal tentatively scheduled for this afternoon. For those of you who suffer from throat problems, make sure to wear a mask. And does everyone remember what today is? If you've forgotten, I'll refresh your memory. This marks the 100th day before the opening of the World's Exposition. So with that in mind, we've come up with the following questionnaire. The topic is the exposition. It's not fair! Huh?
Look straight into that camera! I demand you tell the world the truth!
Listen, stop. You won't shoot me.
Are you sure? If your word means anything, then talk, damn it!
I can't. right now. Why don't you tell them? Go ahead.
It wouldn't mean anything, Mr. Serrano. You don't tell them the truth, so help me all.
I can't do that.
Why not?